Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar from me in sunny Hastings today. It's just gone 1 o'clock, so we'll wait a moment for everyone to join. Do feel free to drop into the Q&A box and say hi while we're waiting. Just leave it a few more moments. Hi to Reem, glad you could make it today. Hi Michelle in Bournemouth, just along the coast from me. And hello to Joe and Heather. That's great, all the way from Ohio.
Wow.
Amazing. Yeah.
Good morning.
Okay, I think we'll make a start now. So hello everyone, welcome to our webinar Accessibility Planning for 2025. I'm Annie Mannion and I'm Digital Marketing Manager at AbilityNet, and I'll be running you through today's session. So just to go through a few bits of housekeeping, we have live captions provided by Tara at MyClearText, and you can turn on the captions using the CC option on the control panel. And additional captions are also available at streamtext.net/player?event=AbilityNet. And you can download the slides if you wish and follow along on our website at abilitynet.org.uk/accessibility planning 2025. And if you have any technical issues or you need to leave early, don't worry, you'll receive an email within the next week sharing the recording, the transcript and the slides. And also, depending on how you joined the webinar, you'll find the Q&A window. So if you'd like to ask the panel any questions, do drop those into the Q&A area and we'll cover as many as possible at the end of the session. And then finally, we'll also have a feedback survey that you'll be directed to at the end. So please do complete that if you're able. So just for those of you who aren't yet familiar with AbilityNet, we're now more than 25 years old. And we support older people and disabled people to use technology to achieve their goals at home, at work, and also in education. And we do this by providing specialist advice, accessibility consultancy, testing and training, and free information like this webinar. So today, discussing accessibility planning for 2025, we're joined by Amy Lowe, who is CEO at AbilityNet, and also Brian Grellmann, UX Research and Accessibility Lead at Aviva. Also joining us are Robin Christopherson, who's Head of Digital Inclusion at AbilityNet, and Jess Cahill, who is Accessibility and Usability Consultant at AbilityNet. So before Amy kicks off our fireside chat with the panel, I'm just going to do a quick poll to find out a bit more about you all here today. So just going to launch the poll now. So can you tell us, does your organisation have an existing accessibility plan in place for 2025? So the responses are yes, no, some teams have one, but not an overall organisation plan, don't know or not applicable. And depending on how you've joined the webinar, you might find that you can't see the poll, but you can respond in the Q&A panel. So I'm just going to leave it a few more moments for everybody that would like to vote. Yeah, couple of slightly stronger contenders than others. Nearly everybody's participated, just a couple more moments. Okay, I'm going to end the poll now and share the results. So looking at the results, the largest amount of people, it's 32%, say some teams have an accessibility plan in place for 2025, but there isn't an overall organisation plan. Then we've got no accessibility plan in place for 2025, and that's 25%. 20% do have one, which is great. 18% aren't sure, and then 4% it's not applicable. So thank you for all your responses, and do stick around for some valuable advice from our panel who are about to impart their wisdom about accessibility planning techniques. So over to you, Amy.
Thanks, Annie. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today with these fantastic panelists to talk about that important topic of planning. So I can't actually believe we're halfway through October 2024 already. And as we're all starting to look at the year ahead, having both a specific and shared plan and for it to be aligned around the goals and the vision of what we want to achieve in the time frame ahead is really fundamental to setting up for success, especially with what really is a change management program when you're looking at implementing and improving digital accessibility across an organization. There's some great quotes around about the importance of planning, and I love this one from Alan Lakin, who was an American author and time management specialist, and he said, planning is bringing the future into the present so you can do something about it now. And I thought that was a really sort of practical way to think about planning. And another one that resonates really strongly with me and perhaps with some of the busy folks in the audience is from a gentleman called Leonard Bernstein, who was a conductor and composer. And he said, to achieve great things, two things are needed: a plan and not quite enough time. And that one speaks to me because I think there's always a time-related excuse for either failing to plan or failing to execute on a plan. And that's where the plan needs to be inspiring enough and sufficiently shared and committed to that the plan always comes first. So let's go to our panelists and firstly catch up with Brian Grellmann from Aviva, and we're going to talk about Brian's program and plans. So firstly, Brian, tell us about your role and your vision for the program at Aviva.
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. My name's Brian. For those of you who don't know Aviva, I would say we're primarily known for our pensions and insurance products, but I would say we're really in the business of financial resilience. I'm UX research and accessibility lead at Aviva, and I look after about 10 to 12 researchers and accessibility consultants here. And then in terms of our vision and our program, I would say it really starts with our principles, which is just another word for us for policy. So I'll use policy. It's probably more familiar with people. And yeah, so it starts with our policy and then it really branches out from there. We want to ensure that all teams can meet our policy. And so that might be through providing really clear processes, training, procurement guidelines, and access to some of our accessibility consultants and specialists. So we ask ourselves, how can we help teams to meet the policy? And then that really defines what our vision and our program is. And we're also based in the design team, so that probably says a little bit as well about what my focus is especially. So we want teams to consider accessibility as early as possible. And so that means doing a lot of that valuable UX research work and including people with disabilities in research sessions so that we can ensure that those needs are fed into product requirements.
Brilliant stuff. And I love the fact that you know, everything centers around the policy or principles. And that means that you've got a really clear vision of where you want to get to. So your program, as you say, is all about facilitating that and making it as straightforward as possible. And again, it's just wonderful to see this based as far left as possible in the development life cycle, because it does avoid last minute scrambling and retrofitting to provide that accessible experience. And fantastic as well that disabled users are at the heart of what you're doing there. So 2024 is whizzing by. How's that been for you? Are there any particular positives or perhaps challenges that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so in 2024, we hired an accessibility team, and we also brought in 2 consultants from AbilityNet who've been fantastic. And we also just recently brought in a tool called Fable, which gives us direct access and really fast turnaround to speak with people who have disabilities and ask them to test our products. So that happened in 2024. We had none of those things in 2023. So I view all of those things as really big wins and positives for the team and for Aviva. In terms of challenges, there's so much to do when you're creating a brand new team in a company that's existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. So sometimes it's really difficult to know where to start, and it can be really easy to feel overwhelmed, I think, by the amount of work that there is to do. And I think quite uniquely, accessibility is one of the things that is really relevant to every single role. We could have a colleague in finance or underwriting or customer service, and there's an accessibility element for everyone. And I think as accessibility people, we're all really motivated and passionate about what we do, and so facing the realities that sometimes we can't help every single person and every single team is I think a challenge. But the positives far outweigh any of the challenges that we've had, and as a new team, we've been embraced by all of our product teams, and they're becoming aware of us, they're asking for help, and they're booking in to do accessibility audits. So yeah, lots of positives to take away from this year.
Sounds like an amazing year. And I think you really hit on something there about the passion that sort of burns in the heart of people that work in the field of accessibility. And that can be it can be very challenging when you can't help everyone and support everyone, and to make those decisions it must be very challenging. But equally, it sounds like that passion has ignited the enthusiasm of the product teams. So, the fact that you're being overrun with requests for help, it can only be a good thing as well, can't it? Rather than tumbleweed and people avoiding you in in the corridors. So sounds like you're doing everything right there. So looking forward, going on to the next slide, how do you go about planning for the year ahead?
Yeah, so a few things are already in plan for us. So part of our policy means that our project work is really driven by the strategic digital portfolio and what all teams are going to be tackling next year. So we try and avoid asking people to come to us and to retrospectively make things accessible. We're going to them and fixing things, or not fixing, but really working on anything that's new and ensuring that whatever we're working on and focused on is going to be accessible for our customers. So part of our work is already determined by the way that we're organized and what our policy states. And a few other things that are in plan for us. So we did the digital accessibility maturity model planning with AbilityNet, and procurement came out as something that we needed to put some focus towards, and we have buy-in now to design the procurement process. So we're in the procurement team's backlog, and we're expecting to design out the procurement process in Q1 next year. One of the projects I'm really excited about is our accessibility personas. So my 2 teams, the research team and the accessibility team, have been conducting lots of research and running workshops across Aviva and designing a set of personas, and they're starting to come to life now, and we'll have a set of 8 completed at the end of the year, and those are going to feature in a lot of our materials, and we'll be socializing them next year, and things like essential learning, vulnerable customer champions training, they'll be part of brand guidelines, and yeah, we'll socialize them as far and wide as possible.
I think personas, going back to what you were saying earlier, Brian, about how crucial it is to engage people in the different roles at every stage in the customer journey. Having those customer personas is just such a great way to remain aligned around what you're trying to achieve, and supporting that customer with their goals and the sort of likely barriers that they're going to encounter. It's that shorthand, isn't it, to be able to have those conversations without sort of just focusing on the technical aspects. It's sort of the human aspects as well. It's interesting that procurement cropped up as an area of improvement, because it's a big challenge for most organizations, isn't it? And I think, again, going back to your policy that you have more generally, as soon as you've got a policy around procurement, it just starts to stem that flow of inaccessible bells and whistles coming into the organization. So it does make a big difference. So going back to the maturity model assessment that you did, because that's an interesting one where you are bringing together a lot of stakeholders. Did you have good engagement across the organisation with the process? The right people in the room?
Yeah, we did, and yeah, it's so important, I think, to have the right people and the right voices, because this is really going to shape the plan and the direction and focus for everyone. I think lots of people had things they wanted to say about accessibility. And I think actually we were probably in the problem of I think we had too many people attending our sessions with Robin and the consultants. But what we did was, so we have an accessibility steering committee, and those are our directors at Aviva. And before we did any work on the dam, we asked AbilityNet to come to the steering committee and present the work. And so we had the buy-in from all of our directors, and then they were then able to help socialize and nominate some of their direct reports to attend and feed into those sessions.
Yeah, that senior stakeholders sort of buy-in is crucial, isn't it, with an initiative like that? So looking into 2025 then, it's always really important to be able to measure your progress and celebrate successes as well, because it can be really full-on work for the individuals that get involved. How are you going to manage that process in 2025?
Yeah, so for us, it comes back to our principles or our policy again. So we measure our progress against the principles. And so in the beginning, the measurements were really simple. It was looking at how many teams were aware of the principle, and we would report on that. And we would say how many teams are following the principle, and we would report on that, or how many teams aren't following the principle. Mm-hmm. And then as we mature and progress, we're also looking at outcomes. So how many teams, how many high severity issues are being produced, and how many are getting fixed before going live. And then the way that the DAM fits into this, or the maturity model work, is that it provides us with the guidance that we need. So if, for example, we know that we're weak on capability or tooling, then we'll put a working group around tooling, and we'll get the tools in place. And then we expect over time to see that our progress against our principles will have improved as a result of better tooling and capability across roles. So it's really a combination, I think, of measuring against our principles and then overlaying the maturity model. I think the maturity model is great because I think it will have high relevance and applicability to all business areas. But as practitioners, I think you have to really understand how things get done in your organization and what that system is, and sort of mesh the two together.
That celebrating success. Sensible. Oh. Yeah, no, I was just going to say that to have so that it sounds like Aviva, it resonates to have that the two axes almost, isn't it, of your internal policies and then the maturity model as a way to benchmark and evaluate against. I like that. Sorry, go on. Successes.
Success. So yeah, I think it's probably something that we don't do enough of. We finish one thing and then we quickly move on to the next. But like I said earlier with the steering committee, one thing that we try to do is anytime a project finishes, we ask that project team to then present and spotlight their work in the steering committee. And that's been a great way to give teams the opportunity to talk about how proud they are of the work and to share it with a very senior audience. And they're all director levels, managing director levels at Aviva. So yeah, what we've seen is that success breeds imitation. And I think once people see a particular project and how successful it was in embedding accessibility, then other teams come to us and say, we want to do that, and we want to have a product that's inclusive and that will work for everyone.
It's such a nicer way to approach it than a stick as well, isn't it? You know, to really have that that opportunity to present success, but then other people start talking about it and getting that energy going. Definitely. So how about top tips? So because it sounds like, you know, in the last year you've come so far and you've got ambitious plans for next year as well that sound like they're really well considered and detailed. So what are your top tips for other people who really want to accelerate and evidence progress in their organizations?
Yeah, so I think there probably isn't a one size fits all here. I think to my point earlier, I think every organization has a system and a way of doing things, and it's really important to understand what resonates with people in your organization and how things get done, and then build out the way your policy or the principles to play off of that. In terms of, I think for us too, what's been really helpful is that in a lot of these things we try to do a lot of the activities ourselves, and we also try to find people who are really passionate about accessibility to help us. But over time, what we found, and especially once we had a program really sort of wrapped around all of the work, was that it isn't just about the people who are passionate about accessibility, but it's also about getting the right people and the people who know how to get things done. And that's been really helpful. And if I think about an example with procurement, for quite a while, we were trying to design the procurement process. We were reading the literature. We were looking at the guidance from AbilityNet. But then actually, as soon as we invited our procurement colleagues, they really sort of put their arms around it and got everything moving along. Aviva's really big on sustainability, so there's also a lot of learnings that we can take from how we've done procurement in the sustainability space and then apply it to the way that we're doing accessibility procurement. So I think finding the experts and the people who know how to get things done is just as important as finding the people who are really passionate about helping and supporting accessibility.
That's such a good point, Brian, and meeting them where they are, speaking their language about what's important to them, isn't it? Because, you know, the people in procurement are going to know all the shortcuts to get stuff done in that area. It's just about getting that time with them and infusing them. And then, as you say, you don't have to solve it anymore. You just say, this is what's needed. What do you need from me? But half the time they'll have a great strategy and plan already up their sleeve once you explain what's needed. Amazing. Well, I don't know about everyone in the audience, but that was a huge amount of useful tips and tricks, but also a fantastic articulation of the art of the possible. And, you know, it's important to say that Brian's been working at this program you know, over a number of years, and you know, congratulations to you, Brian, for getting it to this point, and really excited to see next year unfold.
Thank you.
So we've also got Robin and Jess on the bridge with us today, who I guess you can bring insights from having worked with a wide range of organisations looking at the digital accessibility maturity model. And I'm sure what Brian was saying around how, you know, in various contexts, you tailor it slightly, but you can apply the similar principles across the piece. So I guess if we kick off on our next slide, or perhaps the one after that, sorry, I've not been keeping up. So so maturity models, from your perspectives, Robin and Jess, why do you think people should use a maturity model, and how does our digital accessibility maturity model help with planning?
Great. So yeah, thanks, Amy. So yeah, Jess and I are involved in delivering the facilitated DAM process, the digital accessibility maturity model. Jess is quite new to the process, but I'm hoping that she agrees that it's a really refreshing. Some of the more kind of you know, down in the code audits and diverse user testing and things like that. This is a much higher level process. And as we, I think, have got a very clear idea from Brian about so many moving parts, so many teams, so many processes and you know, spinning plates involved in an organization of any size, really, but particularly a huge organization like Aviva. How on earth do you come to terms with what good looks like across all of those areas? And that's what a maturity model can do. There are lots of other maturity models out there. Some focus on, you know, the whole organization from a ED&I point of view, from a diversity point of view, for example. But ours definitely has a laser focus on digital accessibility, which, as I think we've seen, is quite a big area in itself. So ours is proving very popular because it is focusing specifically in on that. So what does it do? So it gives you a top level view of your organization across a lot of different areas, and we'll look at those in a moment. Brian's touched on lots of them, but we'll come back to those. It helps you, once you've identified those different areas, you can prioritize key areas for change, and you can then plan, which is the purpose of the webinar today. You can prioritize incremental, achievable next steps, so you can nibble away at the big task ahead, the big to-do list that comes out of applying a maturity model process, and you can then start to plan strategically and effectively. And hopefully you'll be able to benchmark then to say, okay, this is where we are today. Aviva did it in May this year, and look how far they've come. Not all down to the DAM process, but certainly it gave a lot of clarity. I'm hoping Brian will agree. But yeah, you can look at the next 6 months, the next 12 months, and you can identify how you want to prioritize those issues that have come up. And we'll look at how the maturity model helps you prioritize on the next slide.
slide.
Oh no.
I don't know if we moved along. Yeah. So I think we've covered that slide, haven't we? So the next slide again.
So is this the Heather quote now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I should tell the audience that I can't see, so I'm just taking your word for it. So yes, Jess, do you want to read the quote from Heather, please?
So this is Heather Hepburn, who's the accessibility lead from Skyscanner. They did the digital accessibility maturity model not long ago, I believe. Anyway, she says it gave us insight into all the areas we need to work on, not just within product development, but across all areas of our business.
Brilliant, thanks. She's a massive advocate of the maturity model process, and yeah, one of the, I think they were the first organization to do it.
Yeah, it's quite a few years ago now, actually. The time flies, doesn't it?
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. But you know, hear her talk at any event and she'll mention about the DAM process, because you know, it really did help to identify where there are the wobbly bits, and you know, make sure that everybody knows what you have the right resourcing, etc. I mean, we'll talk about that on the next slide.
Yeah, so yeah, the process around benchmarking, because people, I think benchmarking is a hot topic, isn't it? People want to, you know, if you're trying to go somewhere, you want to know where you're starting from, don't you?
Exactly. So what we've got here are 5 different dimensions to the DAM. We call them dimensions. Oh, sorry. And their vision. Well, we've got a succinct summary phrase against each of the dimensions. Jess, I don't know if you want to read the one for vision.
Sure. The organisation has a clearly stated vision about why and how it is adopting best practice in accessibility and inclusive design.
Thanks. Now, this section is very much about policy, as we've heard Brian talk about. Have you got a clearly stated vision? Does it specifically talk about digital accessibility, not just digital, not just inclusion in a more general term in your ESG policy or in your ED&I guidelines, you know, very specifically calling out digital accessibility and making sure that you have goals, achievable goals tied to that, as we've been talking about before. And those achievable goals will come out of the process, those measurable goals that you can prioritize. So we'll, once you've gone through the process, you'll be able to identify those and you'll be able to make sure that they are built into the strategy. This is very much the strategy dimension that we've got here. But it all hangs on leadership. So if we talk about the next one.
The organisation is committed to investing in the people and resources it needs to deliver its vision.
Thanks. So yeah, it ties back to the vision. If you don't have the vision, then you can't benchmark yourself against it, and you can't, for example, identify an exec level sponsor who then will be able to have the mandate to be able to act proactively and significantly against those, you know, those goals that you've set out in the policy, in the vision. Ideally, you'd have an exec level sponsor who champions digital accessibility, really clear about that, not just ED&I, not just digital, not just inclusion. And you have an accessibility lead within the organization. So the accessibility lead doesn't have to be a subject matter expert. They just have to be passionate. They have to be a people person. They have to be a doer. And the two of them working together will be able to identify ways that you can deliver against that strategy. The accessibility lead will be able to, you know, rally the troops, help identify, for example, an accessibility champions network within the organization. If you're wondering about all this detail, don't worry about taking notes. It's all in the maturity model documentation that you can download. Under each of these dimensions, we've covered vision and leadership so far, are lots and lots of fine grain, what we call success criteria. So don't worry about taking notes. Everything that we talk about will be covered under those success criteria, and not just in a big long kind of mess or a list. In fact, they're prioritized into things that you should think about doing ASAP versus things that will really make you level up once you've got the groundwork underway, and you'll be able to become, you know, best practice leaders in these different areas. So yeah, it's not only prioritized under, it's not only categorized under these dimensions, it's prioritized under 5 levels as well. Most organizations
nice to have some guidance on how to eat that elephant, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. And full disclosure, most organizations are around the level 1 and 2 mark. So don't be horrified if after time you've looked at this process and that's where you land, because there's a lot of wobbly ad hoc processes and practices out there, and that's what the whole maturity model kind of process is about, is firming up all the wobbly bits and making sure that people are able to do what they need to do day to day as part of their, you know, everyday work, and they have the right resources in place, etc.
It's about making sure there's an ecosystem that supports them, really, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Top to bottom.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Processes, do you want to?
Processes, accessibility and inclusive design is embedded in every stage of the project development lifecycle.
Thanks. So yeah, Brian was talking about processes, embedding. Shifting left is obviously a key phrase that people use to make sure that you get those that code right, even if it's like an agile sprint process that you undertake. There's no excuse for not considering accessibility throughout the life cycle of a process. We no longer should be in the place where you bolt on accessibility at the end. And, you know, if something's bolted on, then when push comes to shove, it can be dropped off as well. There are all kinds of nasty surprises if you think about accessibility as a bolt-on exercise. So yeah, processes, this is all about making sure that people know what they have to do at different times and that accessibility is embedded in everything that people do.
It's business as usual.
Absolutely.
Accessibility, yeah.
Absolutely. And that relies on people being aware of what they have to do and having the right tools, etc. So capability, do you want to read that one out?
It's effectively that the organisation has the skills, tools and resources to deliver its vision.
Brilliant. So yeah, Brian's talked about some of these. So important to make sure that people have the right tooling. What are you going to use? Tools like Fable, other accessibility example that might help with getting the code to a decent place, and then you do some human input as well to make sure that it is really accessible. Your component libraries, your style guides, all these different things need to be reviewed to make sure that you're reflecting a decent level, if not best practice, when it comes to accessibility. Otherwise, you're just going to be creating the building blocks. If they're not as they should be, then you're just going to be having to create poor code and retrofit, which is not ideal. So the building blocks of capability when it comes to tools, but also training and awareness, and making sure that everyone knows what they're doing and they're happy with their own processes. Even something as simple as knowing about the accessibility checker in Office, for example. Digital accessibility within your organization is not just about the people that are creating code and customer facing. They're about anyone within the organization. You will have disabled employees in your organization. So everybody, if they're creating accessible documents, whether it's Word or a PowerPoint or even an email, you wouldn't send an email, a professional email, or save off a Word document without running the spell checker. Let's decide today that we're going to be the sort of people that will run the accessibility checker as well. In Office 365, it really is quite powerful and sophisticated these days. Let's go to the last one, procurement, which Aviva did a brilliant job of getting those guys in the room. Usually they are nowhere to be seen, and it's super hard to get them to engage in the damn process. But yeah, let's read that last one.
The charm factor. Sorry, Jess.
The organisation ensures that purchasing decisions are compliant and contribute to its vision.
Thanks. Yeah. So you don't want to buy in accessibility. Get them engaged, get them involved, get the right checks and balances in the procurement policies that you have and practices. The main takeaway from the procurement process is absolutely do not take vendors at their word. When they say, yes, we will be able to provide an accessible X, Y, and Z, whatever it might be, always ask to see examples of similar projects that they've done in the past, or get them to give you access to the platform before you sign on the dotted line, whatever it might be, because they absolutely will tell you what you want to hear. And, it might be that they are on the learning curve of accessibility, but they'll think it's fine. We'll get to grips with it if we get this contract with Aviva or whoever it might be. But they absolutely then realize that it's much tougher than they thought to get up to speed, or that their platform or whatever actually precludes accessibility because of the way it's been designed. So yeah, always double check, never take their word for it. And those kind of checks and balances ideally will be built into your procurement processes, so that you can make sure that what you're buying in is going to be inclusive.
And there's a real power in actually going back to the capability dimension, empowering procurement professionals to be able to do some basic accessibility checks themselves, because they've all had the snake oil sort of response and not been able to spot it straight off the bat, but just to be able to, attempt to navigate with keyboard, for instance, and see how that goes. You can often find an accessibility barrier within seconds, can't you, if someone's not really talking from the heart, as it were.
Absolutely, yeah. And we at AbilityNet have gone for a product or a platform where it was there or thereabouts from an accessibility point of view, but they made lots of great noises about being really keen to work with us once it was live to really optimize it. Didn't happen. It's like pulling teeth. They're literally not interested, or very, very tardy in their responses, etc. So yeah, we have learned our lesson as well. You really do need to make sure that they are going to be able to deliver on day one. So yeah, loads of pitfalls and potholes in that. Yeah. Let's move on to the last slide.
I was going to say, look at the time. Yes.
Sorry.
So the output and outcomes from the process. Could you just step us through how we create the roadmap and what people come away with after a guided session? Onto the next slide again, please, Kelly.
Cool. So yeah, whether it's guided, facilitated by us, or whether you self-serve after having downloaded the pack, you should be able to identify areas where you need to work and get some guidance about how you can put those changes in place and how to prioritize them. If you go for the facilitated version, then you will get a fulsome report from us, which actually includes loads of linked resources to, what does optimal accessibility statements look like across a range of websites and apps and across different sectors, for example, or what do really good procurement policies look like, and what's the, European standard EN 45130, whatever it is, I can't remember. So there's lots of, resources and brilliant information that you'd get in the report that we would provide as a result of that. But you'd certainly get the prioritization of the issues, and obviously the high priority issues are something you might want to consider tackling in the first 3 to 6 months, and then the sort of action later would be 6 to 12 months, for example. But that's very, very particular to your organization and what your priorities are and where your sticking points are, etc. So yeah, you'll get an action plan, that roadmap, and you'll also be able to benchmark yourself where you are today.
Brilliant stuff. Fantastic. Well, I'm just looking at the time, and I think we're actually at Q&A time, aren't we? So I wonder, Annie, if we had any interesting questions coming through.
Yep, we have, and yeah, thank you so much for all your insightful thoughts and ideas for everyone to consider. Yes, I'm sure you've all got a lot of questions you'd like to ask, so please do fire away in the Q&A panel, and we've already got some lined up to answer. So I'll fire away with a few if you don't mind. So just a quick question. I think this is for Brian. Do you use a specific tool to gauge your statistics for looking at the data?
Yes and no. So we use Excel, and so it's quite. It's not an automated tool by any means, but it works for us. We've kind of combined it as both a monitoring and tracking tool, but also a tool that kind of steps teams through each step of the process. So by combining them, they're sort of finding a very useful checklist for what they need to do, but then they're also giving us the data and the insight that we need to be able to monitor that progress. So that's how we do it now. We might look to bring in a tool in future, but at the moment it's fairly manual.
Sounds like a smart use of Excel, though, to give value as well as tracking within there. Yeah, it is a very flexible. Everyone says, "Oh, just Excel," but actually, you can build exactly what you need, can't you? Then, so yeah.
Thank you. So this is a question from Richard, I think possibly posed towards maybe Robin and Jess. Do you think an organisation needs both an accessibility strategy lead, so the people person, and a technical lead, the nuts and bolts person? But feel free, everybody, to jump in. But over to Robin to start with.
Yeah, I mean, however you want your organisation to be structured, I think those two key figures, the exec sponsor, who ideally would make sure that you had accessibility, digital accessibility, as a running item on the agenda at the senior level meetings, and that would report to the board. It would be their responsibility to be able to report to the board in quarterly or 6-month whatever meetings to say how you're doing against your set goals and measurable targets for digital accessibility to achieve where you want to, as has been identified by the DAM. So yeah, but then within the organization, the accessibility lead could be the subject matter expert. They could be the person who has the technical knowledge, or they don't have to be. So I just don't think it should be a barrier if they're not. As long as they're passionate and they're a people person and they can, rally the troops and they can make sure that an accessibility hub is created and an accessibility champions network is formed and all these things that are outlined in the DAM, make sure that they happen. Whether there's a technical person that they defer to is entirely up to the organization how you want to structure that. But yeah, I think it's really, really important. And then just to finish off, apart, on the topic of getting the troops mobilized, I think it's super, super important to tie accessibility knowledge to CPD, to your continuous professional development, to actually tie it to getting a raise. So you go through, we would recommend the IAAP, the International Association of Accessibility Professionals certifications. And as you go through those and you become qualified in the different levels, that's tied to your CPD. It's mentioned in your objectives, your quarterly review meetings, etc. And you get passionate because you want to become that person who has those skills, and you see material benefits because you get a pay rise if you have met those objectives. So that would be the ideal scenario.
Fantastic, thank you. Does anybody else want to jump in with anything extra on that particular question before we move on to the next one?
Well, in terms of having somebody that people can go to, I think Robin alluded to accessibility champions, and I think that's also incredibly important. If you've got a network of people through the organisation that people can go to if they have accessibility questions, even if all they're doing is signposting.
Yeah,
but they are the go-to people who will be able to help. And some organizations call them accessibility ninjas, some it's like a tribe or a clan. You call it what you like, your network of people, but accessibility champions play a vital part in making sure that everyone has an immediate person to turn to. If they're in different teams, then when you're embedded in a particular team, then what the tools and processes that team uses, and that's much more a powerful contact than if it was a central lead alone. So yeah, a network.
We've got someone in the Q&A saying they're both strategy lead and technical lead. So I mean, that is a fantastic array of skills, isn't it, to be able to address both areas.
Yep.
And also just to flag, we'll put this on the webinar recording page, but we do have some downloadable information about accessibility champions that might be of interest. So yeah, we'll add that to the page. Sort of connected with this, and maybe something for Amy to answer. Sweater has said, I've been trying to make a case at my organisation to get an exec level champion for a really long time. They keep saying it can be part of EDI rather than a specific pursuit in itself. Do you have any advice on how to best explain why accessibility needs its own specific exec level voice?
I think this does crop up a lot, and there are pros and cons of, incorporating digital accessibility in an existing programme. But if you do incorporate it into EDI, it almost needs to have its own work stream, if that makes sense. But I think possibly, the key driver or the key leverage you can give is around the technical aspects, and how perhaps there is value in ensuring that senior stakeholder has some teeth relating to technical side of things is really important, because a lot of the time, in large and complex organizations, a lot still does hang off line management and reporting lines, and also understanding and speaking the language of the people who have to do the work. And I think expecting somebody sitting in an EDI leadership position to be able to address that can be a bit of a challenge. So potentially, I guess it's about whether that EDI person feels confident and capable to drive that through. And if not, then you do need to be looking for somebody who's perhaps more up from a technical or, development background.
Yeah, and that also leads on to another question that was, I'm a team of one in a large organisation. Where should I start with focusing my effort? So maybe Brian, that might be a good question for you to answer.
Yeah, so I think everything that I've talked about has really been about what we've done this year, where we have we have 2 core accessibility teams. We have a program. We have all the sponsorship. But before that, I was the team of 1 as well. So for me, it's been really interesting to, I guess, transition from one to the next. I think, yeah, in terms of where to start, DAM, of course, is a great place to start because it tells you where your weak points are. And Robin alluded to some of the, the wobbly practices and things like that. And we still have that as well. We have some teams that are very strong, and then some teams that are not strong or have no experience with accessibility. And what happens when you have that is that you've got accessibility just tends to fall through the cracks, and you also create a lot of tension between teams because you might have one team doing something that another team then doesn't understand once the handover happens. And so for us, our process, at the moment where we might have sort of, I'm moving my hands, apologies, but you might have some people up really high and others really low. We want to sort of move everything up sort of consistently at the same level. And so that's what the DAM does. And then I think the point that Jess made earlier around a champions network, something that we've done specifically for the champions network is we've identified our experts to say, okay, this person is particularly knowledgeable on color contrast, or this person knows ARIA, or this person knows how to do headings. So we've identified people with very specific skills that can also help, because as one person, it's very difficult to support everyone, and you need to delegate or share as much as possible.
Yeah. Excellent advice. There's the question from Caroline that's come through about when working with digital product teams. So this might resonate with some of the work that you've been doing, Brian. The teams that may already be, in an already full roadmap, to encourage them to move accessibility improvements higher up the priority list. And similarly, Jess, you may have worked with clients that have experienced similar challenges. Don't know who'd like to go first.
So yeah, moving accessibility up the priority for product teams. So I mean, for us, it starts with our policy. So our policy says that anything that is new has to be accessible, and so and then that's what we're reporting. So if we're reporting that a team isn't following the policy, then it's it's shame on them, and they'll have to sort of justify why they haven't followed a process. So I think getting a policy in place that everybody is on board with is really important. And then I think the other obvious is the technical debt and shifting left. You want to, my team are supporting product teams to anticipate things that could be issues and to try and stamp them out as early as possible in the design process so that the build becomes simpler and easier and teams aren't stuck in remediation. So I think it's, for us, we're financial services, we're regulated, we have our policy, so we have lots of things that work in our favor, and it's probably about identifying some of those levers to pull on.
Technical debt's a really interesting point as well, Brian, because a lot of the time, by having minimum standards that include digital accessibility, you can reduce the level of technical debt that you're dragging behind you, which a lot of the time accessibility considerations sort of copy back to good clean code that
I think that was what I was going to, one of the things I was going to mention as well is that, again, it comes back to not necessarily regarding accessibility as something separate, but as about creating healthy products and that being part of the process. But then also people do always have to make judgment calls on priority, and has the importance been properly communicated, have any legal requirements or, pressure from regulators, whatever that, are people actually aware of the drivers for this? Are people on board with, why are we doing this? I think hearts and minds is one of the things I always say about being an accessibility consultant. 50% of it is knowledge, 50% of it is just evangelizing and making sure that people understand why we're doing this, see the importance of it. I don't see it as something over there that applies to other people.
That's a good point.
Well, thank you. I think just looking at the time, it's time to wrap up now. And sorry for people that have posed questions that we haven't had a chance to answer at this time. So thanks so much to Amy, Robin, Jess, Brian and Tara with my clear text today, and also to my colleague Kelly for helping out in the background. I just wanted to share a bit more information that might be of interest. So AbilityNet also offers accessibility services about accessibility audits and testing, user research, in-house training, accreditation and certification, and consultancy and strategy. And those services are delivered by Robin, Jess, and their expert team of colleagues. So you can find out more at abilitynet.org.uk/speak to our experts, and also at /accessibility-services. And we also outlined earlier that we have a digital accessibility maturity model that can help with your planning for the year ahead. So please do head over to abilitynet.org.uk/DAMM, DAMM, to find out more and download your free toolkit. And also, we also run online training sessions about digital accessibility and inclusion for groups in-house and also for individuals. You can find out more at /training. And if you use the code AbilityNet webinar 10 when booking, you can save 10% on all our courses for individuals. So if you have any questions about training, please do get in touch at /training inquiry. And we'd also like to let you know about our upcoming annual TechShare Pro conference, which is Europe's premier accessibility event, and that's at www.techsharepro.com. And you can book now for a special 25% discount using the code, which is TSP2024T25, which is exclusive to you as webinar attendees. And then just finally, you can also sign up to our newsletter for our latest advice about inclusion and our next free webinars, which you can access at /webinars. Coming up, we have an introduction to AI for older people on the 20th of November. And then on the 4th of December, how to steer clear of seasonal scams. So thanks again to everyone who's joined us. Please do complete the feedback form that you'll be directed to, and we'll be in touch with you soon and hope to see you at the next session. Thanks, everyone.